Today's video, I'm going to be discussing how internal work can change your life. We're going to talk about some examples of internal work and why we would want to do internal work. So I'm excited to share that with you. But before we get into that, I want to I want to actually do a brief moment of silence for Vincent Piazza. So we're just going to take a few moments and give a moment of silence to Vincent Piazza. Thank you. Um, the reason I'm giving a moment of silence for Vincent Piazza is Vincent was a friend of mine. He was an amazing magician. I only talked to him online and like in terms of Facebook chat or on some podcasts that I did where I interviewed him. But he introduced me to the work of Damo Mitchell, which was a Taoist work. And since a lot of the Taoist work I do is actually part of the internal work I do, I feel like it's appropriate to acknowledge him in that sense. But also, just Vincent was a wonderful person, an amazing artist, an amazing writer, but just a wonderful person overall. And I just found out today that he died, and he will be missed. So I wanted to just acknowledge him and honor him. And what is remembered lives. So let's talk about internal work and why we do it and what it is and all those other things. I think that most people who practice magic unfortunately don't do internal work. I know that's a pretty bold statement, but I'm going to stand by it. And the reason why I'm going to stand by it is because when I see the amount of drama among occult circles, it convinces me that for the most part there's not internal work going on there. And you might say, well, what is internal work, Taylor? Why should we even care about internal work? Why should we even do it? Well, internal work, to put it succinctly, is work that you're doing on your emotions, your triggers, your reactions, your habits, your addictions, your behaviors. And why we should do it is because otherwise we live a life by reaction. And I don't think living a life by reaction is really a magical life at all. I don't think that as magicians we really have control for living a life by reaction. Because when we're living a life by reaction, what we're doing is we're waiting for things to happen to us. We're waiting for things to occur. And and we're not really taking charge of our lives. Now, in all fairness, it can be said that we are not in control of everything that happens to us. And it is also fair and honest to say that there will be times where we are reacting to things, where things will come our way. But in my own approach to magical work and really to my life, I've focused on building a life by design, and part of that means that I try to minimize the amount of reaction that occurs, and that I even purposely and intentionally set up programmed reactions that I've consciously chosen instead of letting those reactions happen to me. You can have situations occur and you have to react, but it doesn't mean that you can't choose those reactions and have them set up. And so when I look at internal work, I look at it as a function of really getting your house in order, cleaning cleaning up after yourself, getting your shit together, taking care of who you are and what you are and everything else. And you're doing it for a few reasons. The first reason you're doing it is because you need to take care of yourself. We all grow up in circumstances where we're shaped by our families, by our schools, by our friends, and by the experiences that we have. And if you're fortunate, you don't have too many traumatic experiences as you're growing up, but I can guarantee you that you'll have at least a couple. And those experiences can change and shape your life in ways you don't even expect. You can find yourself getting angry at the drop of a hat for reasons you don't even understand. You can find yourself engaged in drama with other people. And I say drama because when I see people losing themselves and reacting to other people, and letting those people kind of control them in a very real sense by what they're doing, because they're getting drama, they're getting, really caught up in their drama. I call it for what it is. It's something that it's something where you don't have control and you're caught up in somebody else's power game, and that's what drama is. When you have those kinds of triggers and behaviors and things like that, you can either let them define you or you can choose to define them. And for the first part of your life, they will certainly define you, because you don't know yourself well enough to know what to do, and you aren't likely going to have the necessary skills and behaviors and habits that you need to have in order to transform your life in that way. You just don't. We don't come into this world with a manual that says, okay, here's what you do when this traumatic situation occurs. Here's what you do when you get bullied. Here's what you do when someone tries to molest you or do something else to you. Here's what you do in each of these situations. We don't have that. We have to learn those behaviors. And unfortunately, a lot of times what we initially learn are behaviors that serve us at the time as a way of coping or getting through something, but they aren't necessarily the healthiest behaviors. They're developed as a response to something because we don't know any better, and that's what we've got to deal with. So how do we deal with it? We deal with it by recognizing and acknowledging that these emotions, these behaviors are there, and that they're there in a way that defines us. And we decide at a certain point, well, we've got to change it. And I'll share a personal example here. My moment of realization was in 2004. I was 27 at the time, and I had 26, 27, and I woke up one night and I realized, you know what? I am going on a bad path in my life. I'm going to end up in jail, or I'm going to end up in a bad place if I don't change. But the dilemma I had is I didn't know how to change. And yes, at this point, I'd been practicing magic for about 10 years. 10 years at that point. So you think, well, Taylor, if you're practicing magic, you can just do some magical work. But here's what I came to realize. The magical work up until that point in time was done as a reaction to things. I mean, if you look at a lot of magic, what is it? Oh, problem came into your life. I'm going to use magic to solve it. And I'm not saying that there's anything wrong with that, because there isn't. I mean, I still do magic to solve problems on occasion. But here's what I came to recognize. I was always using magic to resolve problems, but I wasn't dealing with the core issue around the problem. I wasn't dealing with really the one thing that problem had in common. Because if I looked at every single problem in my life, it had one thing in common, and it's me. And I want to be very clear that when I talk about that, I'm not saying that, all the problems you experience in your life are your fault. That's not what I'm saying. But I am saying that you participate in your problems. You play a participatory role. Now, it may not be a role that you've consciously chosen. It may not be a very empowering role. It may be a role that makes you feel disempowered and makes you feel helpless. Fair enough. I'm not trying to put that on you. I'm not saying that you're a bad person for feeling that way. What I am saying is it's important to recognize that you do have a role in that problem. And that the first step of empowerment in your life is taking responsibility for that role. It's acknowledging, I feel this way, and this is part of why I'm having these problems show up in my life. It may not be the only thing, it likely isn't. And I'm going to have to figure out a better response, but this is what it is. And that was the moment of realization I had in 2004. I realized that I was feeling helpless toward all these different behaviors and things. And I realized that magic alone wasn't going to solve it. So then I shared the experience with a friend of mine, and I said, what do you think I should do? And this friend introduced me to Taoist water meditation. And he said, you should try this. You should try some meditation. It was all right. I was already doing daily work. So he said, why not? I read the book and I started doing Taoist water meditation. I started doing this meditation, and I found that within a few months, things started getting better. And I want to be clear, internal work isn't something where you just do it for a few months and everything's automatically all better. I said it started to get better. I'm still doing internal work to this day. You might say, well, Taylor, you're this was 2004. It's 2020 now at the time of this recording. That's 16 years later, and you're still doing internal work? But come on, like why couldn't you have it figured out by now? Well, let me tell you something. I had up until that point in 2004, I had a lifetime of experiences where I was reacting to things, and for the most part, I didn't have much of a sense of control. And even when I did have a sense of control, a lot of it was illusory. It takes a long time to work through and deprogram the things that you have in your life that cause you to react certain ways, because these things are embedded and embodied in you. And you can end up doing some internal work and think you got it all sorted out. And you do on one level. But then you go in a little bit deeper and you discover another level and you discover, oh, there's more layers to this onion than I thought. That's part of what internal work is. Internal work is not something that is done in one day. It's not something that's done in a week or a month or a year. It's something that you commit to doing. Now, what I can tell you is that the more internal work you do and the more consistent with it you are, the less reactions you're going to have. The less programmed behavior you're going to have, the less triggers you're going to have, because you're going to work through those. And you're going to find that your life becomes calmer and calmer and easier to live. That's what I discovered as I continued doing this work. If I were to compare who I was, if I were to meet who I was in 2004 now, I would say that person, I'd look at that person and I'd be like, it's another example of a magician who causes a lot of drama because he doesn't have his act together. And I'd be right. And really, I mean, even for the first 5 years that I was doing internal work, I still caused a lot of drama in my own life and in other people's lives. It took me a while to really begin to start working through that and get through it and get to a place where I wasn't causing that level of drama. And I know people sometimes see the word drama as like a negative thing, like, oh, if he's calling drama, whatever. But I'm going to tell you something. The reason why I use that word so purposely is because I kind of watch with amusement when I see people on Facebook who are sharing pictures of screenshots of their conversations with other people because they're trying to prove something or another, or whatever. And they're just caught up in these power games, and I'm like, what would it be like if you weren't caught up in those power games, if you were able to just let those go? Would you even care as much? And I'm not saying we shouldn't call out bad behavior or recognize certain things. And I'm not saying that you'll not ever have reactions to things. You will. But I think that ideally we want to get to a point where our lives calm down and where we're really able to focus and do the work that we're called to do without necessarily having to get into conflict with other people about it. I have a few enemies still, probably to this day. I have certain people who don't like me, and I don't like them. But I can tell you that I have had very little, if any, interaction with them for years now. And my goal really is to have no interaction with them ever again in my life. I don't need to interact with them. I don't need to get into some feud or spat with them. I could care less about them. As far as I'm concerned, they're dead to me. And I'm okay with that because I don't need to engage and interact with them in order to have a sense of power in my life. My power comes from within. It doesn't have to come about as a result of reacting to other people. And that's really what internal work teaches you. It teaches you how to recognize your own power. And it teaches you how to work through and detangle all those triggers and reactions and everything else. And it doesn't mean that, like if you've had traumatic experience, it doesn't mean that those traumatic experiences are gone. If you've been raped or you've been beaten or anything along those lines, those experiences are still there. It just gives you better tools for handling them. And I say this as someone who's been both a sexual assault and mental and physical abuse survivor. it gives you better tools and ways to work through these things so they no longer define your existence in the way they did before. And so that you can transform them and transform your relationship with them into something that is positive and better for you, and maybe even for the people in your life. I mean, because here's the thing, you carry these behaviors with you, these reactions with you into your life, and you will have an effect on other people with them, because you're going to be triggered at times by what those people are doing. And the question you have to ask yourself is, do you want to continue to be that way? Or do you want to change your relationship so that the relationship you have with people in your life is a positive one? And so that you cut down on the drama and you let go of the enemies, and you move on, and you live a life where you're just focused on doing the work that's really important. And that's really where I'm at. I'm doing the work that's important. I'm doing the things that matter instead of focusing on the drama or the behavior. Nowadays, I just shake my head for a moment and just move on for the most part, because I'd rather focus on the causes that are important to me. And those causes aren't going to be found in arguing with somebody about, some magical thing this or magical thing that, or getting caught up in community drama or any of that. It's going to be found in just doing the work, and finding my community and letting that community, being that presence in that community that is stabilizing and grounding and shows that community like this is what we can really do if we work together. That's my function and that's my purpose, and that's really what I would invite you to do in your life. So, if you need to do internal work, if you need help with that, there are resources. There's books, and I actually have a couple of courses in the Magical Experiments University, which you can check out, including a course that I'm literally releasing tonight called Internal Work. So you can check that out there on the internal or on the Magical Experiments page. But regardless of what you do, whether you pick up some books or take some classes, or do whatever else, just be gentle with yourself and take care of yourself, and just recognize that you can walk away from drama. You don't have to have drama. And hey, full admission here, folks, I still have the occasional bit of drama in my life. I still have the occasional trauma and reaction and things all like that. Like I said, this is ongoing work. We're all human. We're not perfect. We're going to have those experiences. But you can cut down on those incidences and they become less and less. And here's what you replace it with. You replace it with conscious behaviors, conscious choices, and your life just becomes easier. All right, thanks for watching, and I'll see you guys next week.